The monitor shrieked, its sharp, unbroken tone signaling the end. "I've done everything I can," Dr. Alistair Finch declared, his voice echoing not with sorrow, but with the frustration of a master sculptor whose marble had cracked. He peeled off his gloves, tossing them aside with theatrical finality. In the sterile silence of the presidential medical wing, the president's son was lost. Isabel Croft, the president's chief of staff, turned her back to the bed, her expression already shifting from medical crisis to political damage control. "Someone get her out of here," she said, her voice a blade of ice, nodding towards the quiet nurse in the corner. "We don't need weeping onlookers." Her junior, Dr. Thorne, smirked. "What's wrong, nurse? Never seen a god fail?" But Ana Oliveira wasn't weeping. Her eyes, calm and focused, were locked on the monitor, seeing a ghost of a pattern no one else did. Ignoring the condescending glares and the suffocating despair, she moved from the shadows. Her soft voice, though barely a whisper, sliced through the room's tension with the force of a command. "Step aside." Dr. Finch spun around, his face a mask of outrage. The insignificant nurse was walking towards him, her humble presence suddenly filling the room. She was about to defy the world's greatest surgeon to save a life he had already abandoned. The silence that followed Anna's two words was more violent than the monitor's alarm. Dr. Alistair Finch, a man whose portrait hung in the halls of the world's most prestigious medical institutions, turned with the slow, deliberate menace of a king whose authority had just been questioned by a scullery maid. His face, a canvas of disbelief, hardened into a mask of pure fury. "What did you just say?" he hissed, the words dripping with venom. He took a step towards her, his towering frame casting a shadow over Anna's modest form. "Did you, a nurse, just give me an order?" Dr. Marcus Thorne, ever the loyal sycophant, immediately stepped between them, puffing out his chest as if to physically shield his mentor from Anna's audacity. "You are wildly out of line, Oliveira," he sneered, his eyes scanning her simple, worn-out uniform with contempt. "Dr. Finch is the foremost expert on pediatric cardiac surgery on the planet. He has declared the patient deceased. Your job now is to document the time and shut your mouth." Isabel Croft, the chief of staff, materialized at Thorne's side, her face pale with rage. Her concern was no longer for the boy on the bed, but for the catastrophic breach of protocol unfolding before her. "This is insubordination of the highest order," she seethed, her voice dangerously low. She held up her phone. "Security is on its way to escort you from the premises. And be assured, Nurse Oliveira, this isn't just about your job. I will personally see to it that your nursing license is revoked. You will be a pariah in the medical community. You will never so much as take a patient's temperature in this country again." It was a systematic dismantling of a person's life, delivered in cold, precise sentences. Humiliation by 1,000 cuts. First, the professional attack from Finch. Second, the physical intimidation from Thorne. Third, the career-ending threat from Croft. They formed a trinity of arrogance, a wall of power designed to crush anyone who dared to step out of their designated place. Any other person would have crumpled, apologized, and fled in tears. But Ana didn't flinch. She didn't even seem to register their threats. Her focus remained laser-sharp, her entire being concentrated on the patient, Leo, the president's 12-year-old son. She pointed a steady, unwavering finger at the flat line on the main monitor. "You're wrong," she stated, her voice still soft but now imbued with an unshakable certainty that infuriated them even more. "Look." She gestured towards a secondary diagnostic screen, one displaying raw neurological feedback, a screen most doctors considered esoteric, background noise. The monitor is calibrated for standard cardiac electrical impulses. It can't read him. But the brainstem is still firing. There's a microrhythm. A deep, chaotic ventricular flutter, so faint it's being registered as a flatline. It's an electrical storm, but the heart is still trying to fight. He's not gone. He's trapped. Finch let out a short, barking laugh devoid of any humor. A microrhythm? Trapped? Are you a medical professional or a spiritualist? I have personally reviewed this boy's case for months. He suffers from a genetic myocardial channelopathy. What you are describing is a clinical impossibility. It's a phantom. An artifact on the screen created by residual electrical discharge in the muscle tissue. It's the last echo of a battle that has already been lost. You're seeing what you want to see, nurse, a ghost in the machine. She probably read about it on some wellness blog, Thorne added with a roll of his eyes, turning to share a smirk with Finch. Right next to articles about healing crystals and aura cleansing. The doors to the suite swung open with a pneumatic hiss, cutting off any further retort. President Caldwell stood on the threshold, his face a ruin of grief. For a moment, he was not the most powerful man in the world, but simply a father who had arrived too late. His eyes went from the still form of his son to the defeated posture of the world's greatest surgeon, and finally, to the lone nurse standing her ground against a tidal wave of scorn. What is going on here? The president's voice was raspy, broken. Isabel Croft immediately went into damage control mode, stepping forward to intercept him. Mr. President, this is not something you should see. Dr. Finch did everything humanly possible. The situation is concluded. This nurse, she said, waving a dismissive hand at Ana, is emotionally overwrought and refusing to accept the outcome. Dr. Finch nodded gravely, his expression shifting to one of solemn sympathy. Sir, your son fought bravely. But his condition was simply too aggressive. It is with the heaviest of hearts that I must tell you he has passed. But the president's gaze remained on Ana. He saw no hysteria in her eyes. He saw a strange, profound calm. A focus that seemed almost holy in a room reeking of failure. He had built his entire career on reading people, on sensing conviction where others saw only madness. You, he said, his voice locking onto Ana. You don't believe he's gone. Before Ana could answer, Finch interjected. Sir, please, this is not the time for false hope. This nurse is engaging in fantasy. We have exhausted every protocol. Every medical option has failed. The president finally turned his full attention to the celebrated surgeon. A flicker of the authority that commanded nations returned to his eyes. You told me you were the best. You told me there was no one else. You said if anyone could save him, it was you. And now you tell me he's gone. But this woman, a nurse you seem to hold in complete contempt, she says you're wrong. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. So I ask you, Dr. Alastair Finch. Are you 100% certain she is wrong? Is there not a 1 in a billion chance? Because as a father, I will take that chance. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Dr. Finch's reputation, Isabel's control, and Thorne's ambition were all suddenly on the line, challenged by a quiet nurse and a grieving father's desperate hope. The humiliation was meant to silence her, but instead, it had given her the spotlight. Dr. Finch's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. To be questioned by a nurse was an insult. To be questioned by a nurse in front of the President of the United States was a declaration of war on his entire world. His arrogance, when cornered, did not retreat, it metastasized. Mr. President, Finch began, his voice taking on the patronizing tone of a professor lecturing a particularly slow student. With all due respect to your grief, you are not a medical professional. What this nurse is proposing is not just wrong, it is dangerously ignorant. Your son's condition, a variant of catecholaminergic polymorphic ventricular tachycardia, means his cardiac cells are flooded with calcium. They cannot reset. The flutter she claims to see is nothing more than post-mortem electrical noise. To introduce any further stimulus, to attempt any procedure based on this hallucination, would be tantamount to desecrating his body. He gestured expansively at the array of monitors and machines surrounding the bed. This room represents the pinnacle of modern medical science. We have technology that can map the human heart to the micron. Do you truly believe that a nurse with a 2-year degree has perceived something that this entire suite of equipment and my 30 years of experience has missed? What she is offering is not hope, sir. It is a cruel fantasy, a final, agonizing twist of the knife for a grieving father. The president's face was a stone mask, but his eyes were locked on Ana. He had listened to the expert's condescending jargon, the confident dismissal. Yet, he could not shake the feeling that the truth lay in the nurse's quiet, unyielding calm. "So you won't even consider it," the president stated flatly. A predatory gleam entered Dr. Finch's eye. He saw his opening. He would not just dismiss Ana, he would utterly demolish her, using her own delusion as the weapon. He would give her the rope and watch her hang herself with it. "Oh, no, sir," Finch said with a chilling smile. "I believe in science. And the core of science is proving a hypothesis. Let's treat this as an experiment." He turned to Ana, his voice booming in the tense room. "You want to prove us all wrong? Fine. The floor is yours. But you won't use our tools. A defibrillator shock would be catastrophic. Our micropacemakers are too slow. No. If you truly believe there is a coordinated storm inside that boy's heart, then you must quell it yourself." He walked over to a supply cart, his movements sharp and aggressive. "You would need to perform a direct, blind, intracardiac injection. A cocktail, delivered with pinpoint precision, directly into the sinoatrial node. The heart's own pacemaker. A target no bigger than a grain of rice." He let the impossibility of the statement hang in the air. The cocktail itself would be a razor's edge. Too much adenosine, you'll cause a permanent atrioventricular block. Too much lidocaine, you'll stop the heart for good. Too little magnesium, and you'll do nothing at all. There is no machine to guide you. No ultrasound that can see through the chaotic electrical noise. You would be guided by nothing but your, what did you call it? Your intuition. Isabel Croft gasped. "Dr. Finch, you can't be serious." "Mr. President, this is madness." Finch ignored her, his eyes boring into Ana. He was building the cage, bar by bar. Now, he would lock the door. "And then there's the clock," he added, a final flourish of cruelty in his tone. "The brain has been deprived of oxygen. Even if your microrhythm is real, the cells are dying. You wouldn't have minutes. You would have seconds. Let's be generous, let's give you 90 seconds from the moment the needle is in your hand." He stepped back, crossing his arms. The trap was set. "So, that is the challenge, Nurse Oliveira. 90 seconds. A blind injection into a 2mm target. Get the chemical balance perfect. Do it now, in front of all of us. If you succeed, I will personally nominate you for every medical award in existence. But if you fail, when you fail, you will not just be fired. I will ensure you are prosecuted. Practicing medicine without a license. Aggravated assault. Perhaps even negligent homicide. You will spend the rest of your life in a prison cell, remembering this day." Every person in the room held their breath. It was a monster of a challenge, designed not to be won, but to inflict the maximum possible punishment and humiliation. It was a public execution disguised as a medical procedure. The president turned to Ana, his eyes filled with a desperate, agonizing hope. "Can you?" He couldn't finish the sentence. Ana looked from the grieving father to the arrogant surgeon. She saw the sneering face of Dr. Thorne, who was already preparing to watch her fail. She saw the cold fury of Isabel Croft. She felt the weight of their judgment, their certainty of her failure. Then she looked down at the pale face of the boy on the bed. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. She gave a single, resolute nod. Then she turned to the stunned Dr. Thorne. Her voice was clear and steady, the voice of a professional in her element. "I need a 10 cubic centimeters syringe with a 20-gauge, 3.5-inch spinal needle. The cocktail is 20 milligrams of adenosine, 120 milligrams of lidocaine, and 2 grams of magnesium sulfate. Do not shake the vial when you mix. Draw it up. Now." The challenge had been accepted. The countdown was about to begin. 90 seconds. That's all they've given her to defy the world. A grieving father's last hope rests on the steady hands of a nurse everyone dismissed. We all know what it feels like to be underestimated, to have a skill or strength that the world refuses to see. If you believe that true worth isn't measured by titles or fancy suits, and you're rooting for the quiet underdog to finally show them all, then take a second and hit that subscribe button. Become part of our community, because you are not going to want to miss the moment a forgotten nurse reminds a room full of giants what a real hero looks like. The large digital clock on the wall monitor reset to 90 seconds and began its silent, relentless countdown in stark red numbers. 89, 88. 87, each descending digit was a hammer blow in the suffocating silence of the room. Dr. Thorne, a cruel smirk still playing on his lips, held the prepared syringe out to Ana. "Here you go, doctor," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice. "Try not to miss." Dr. Finch stood back, arms crossed, the very picture of condescending authority. He had already won. In his mind, he was merely observing the final, pathetic spasms of a nurse's career-ending delusion. Isabel Croft stood beside him, her expression a mixture of fury and anxiety, already mentally drafting the press release that would spin this disaster. The president, by contrast, looked like a man at his own execution, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, his breath hitched in his throat. He was a father watching his last, impossible hope flicker to life. Ana took the syringe from Thorne. Her hand was so steady it looked like it was carved from stone. The moment her fingers closed around the cold glass, a profound change came over her. The quiet, unassuming nurse who apologized for taking up space seemed to evaporate, and in her place stood a figure of absolute, unwavering focus. The room, the threats, the ticking clock, it all faded into a muted background hum. Her entire universe contracted to 3 points, the boy on the bed, the needle in her hand, and the invisible storm raging within his chest. She didn't look at the spot where medical charts said the sinoatrial node should be. That was anatomy for amateurs, a map for a country she already knew by heart. Instead, she closed her eyes. The room gasped. To perform a blind injection was one thing, to do it with your eyes literally shut was an act of either divine inspiration or utter insanity. Ana placed her free hand lightly on Leo's chest, her fingertips resting just over the sternum. To the others, the gesture looked like a pointless, sentimental comfort. But Ana wasn't comforting. She was listening. Finch had dismissed the electrical noise as post-mortem echoes, but Ana could feel it, could read it. It wasn't just noise, it was a language. Through the palm of her hand, she felt the chaotic, discordant vibration, the frantic tremor of a heart tearing itself apart. She wasn't looking for a landmark, she was feeling for the eye of the hurricane, the tiny, 2-millimeter point of calm around which the entire electrical storm raged. Time seemed to slow. 74, 73. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Her fingers moved, almost imperceptibly, tracing patterns on the boy's skin that only she could understand. Finch's smirk began to fade, replaced by a flicker of confusion. He had expected fumbling, hesitation, a panicked guess. He saw none of that. He saw a terrifying, inexplicable certainty. 61, 60. 59. There, Ana whispered, the word spoken to herself, a confirmation of a truth only she could perceive. In a single, fluid motion, her other hand moved. The needle, long and formidable, pierced the skin. There was no hesitation, no tremor. She advanced it slowly, millimeter by excruciating millimeter, her eyes still shut, her entire consciousness focused on the infinitesimal feedback traveling up the steel shaft into her fingertips. The room was frozen. Thorne's mouth hung slightly agape. Isabel Croft had taken a half-step forward, her icy composure finally cracking. Ana's fingers on the boy's chest tensed. She felt a subtle shift in the chaotic vibration, a change in the resistance at the needle's tip. The storm was fighting back, but she had found its source. She had found the node. With a slow, steady pressure of her thumb, she depressed the plunger, releasing the life-or-death cocktail into the heart of the storm. She administered the entire 10 cubic centimeters dose in a perfectly controlled stream that lasted exactly 12 seconds. 45, 44. 43. She withdrew the needle with the same surgical grace and stepped back. Her eyes opened. For a few agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The line on the monitor remained stubbornly, defiantly flat. The only sound was the mocking countdown of the clock. 38, 37, 36. A triumphant sneer began to form on Dr. Finch's face. He opened his mouth to pronounce the final judgment, to declare her a failure and a fraud. But the word never came. Beep. It was faint, almost pathetic, a ghost of a sound. But it was there. A single, perfect green spike on the monitor, followed by a return to the flat line. Finch froze. Everyone stared at the screen. 33, 32. 31. Beep. Another one. Stronger this time. Spaced perfectly from the first. From the far corner of the room, another doctor who had been silently monitoring the boy's brain activity let out a strangled gasp. It was Dr. Lena Petrova, a world-renowned neurocardiologist, a woman whose opinion carried nearly as much weight as Finch's. All eyes darted to her. She was staring, wide-eyed, at her own bank of monitors. "What is it, Lena?" Finch demanded, his voice strained. Dr. Petrova looked from her screen to the main heart monitor, her face a mask of utter disbelief. "The V-attach is gone," she stammered. "The electrical discharge from the heart, it didn't just stop being chaotic. It's reorganizing. The signal is perfectly synchronized with the brainstem's autonomic command. That's not supposed to be possible. He's rebooting the heart. From the source code. Beep. Beep. Beep." The solitary spikes were now a rhythm. Slow, steady, but undeniably alive. The flat line was gone. The storm was over. And the clock read 22 seconds remaining. Beep. 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 The rhythm on the monitor grew stronger, more confident with each beat. It was the sound of an impossible sunrise. The stark, flat line of death had been replaced by a vibrant, living pulse. The color returned to the boy's face, a faint pink blush chasing away the ghastly, waxy pallor. His oxygen saturation levels, which had been 0, began to climb with astonishing speed, 78%, 85%, 92%. The room remained locked in a state of suspended disbelief. Dr. Thorne stared at the monitor, his mouth hanging open, his earlier sneer replaced by a look of slack-jawed awe. He looked from the living data on the screen to Ana, then back again, as if trying to reconcile two completely incompatible realities. This was the nurse he had mocked, the woman he had dismissed as a fool. And she had just performed a resurrection. Isabel Croft's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Her political mind, trained to calculate every outcome, had crashed. There was no protocol for miracles. The narrative she had been constructing, a story of heroic but tragic failure, had been torn to shreds. She was witnessing a political liability transform into a national hero, and her complete mishandling of the situation was on full display in front of the president. The blood drained from her face as she realized the depth of her miscalculation. But the most profound reaction was Dr. Alastair Finch's. He was a statue carved from shattered pride. His entire understanding of the world, his place in it, and the very laws of medicine upon which he had built his empire, had just been demolished by a quiet nurse with a needle. He stared at the steady rhythm of the boy's heart, a rhythm he had declared impossible. It was a monument to his failure. Every beat was a personal accusation. He had been wrong. Not just mistaken, but fundamentally, arrogantly, and publicly wrong. The silence from him was more damning than any scream. Dr. Petrova, the neurocardiologist, was the first to find her voice, and she used it to translate the miracle into science. She did it, Petrova breathed, walking closer to the main console, her eyes scanning the data with feverish intensity. "Finch, you were right that a standard defibrillation would have killed him. His heart's electrical system was too chaotic. It was like trying to put out a forest fire with a lightning strike." She turned to the president, explaining in simpler terms. "What Nurse Oliveira did, it's a theoretical procedure known as focal arrhythmia ablation by chemical depolarization. It's something researchers write papers about, but no one does it. The risk is astronomical." She pointed to Ana. She didn't just dump drugs into his heart. She felt the precise epicenter of the electrical storm and delivered the cocktail to neutralize that one specific point, the sinoatrial node. By shutting it down for a split second, she forced the entire cardiac system to perform a hard reboot. She didn't just restart the heart, Mr. President. She purged the virus. Petrova looked at Ana with a reverence that bordered on worship. The level of sensitivity, the sheer nerve, it's not a skill you can teach. It's a gift. The clock on the monitor continued its countdown, a forgotten relic of a crisis that was now over. 15, 14, 13. Ana, however, was not finished. The boy was alive, but he was not yet safe. Her focus, which had been a pinpoint, now expanded to encompass the entire room. She was no longer the humble nurse, she was the commander of this battlefield. He's stabilizing, but his blood pressure is too low, she said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence with crisp authority. She turned directly to Dr. Thorne. Start a dopamine drip. Low dose. 2 micrograms per kilogram per minute. Now. Thorne, shaken from his stupor, blinked like a man waking from a dream. The command was so absolute, the tone so confident, that his deeply ingrained medical hierarchy kicked in. He didn't question, he obeyed. Yes, of course, he stammered, scrambling toward the stand, his hands fumbling with the bags and tubes. The man who had tried to physically block her moments ago was now rushing to follow her orders. We need to protect his brain from reperfusion injury, Ana continued, her gaze sweeping the room. Get me a therapeutic hypothermia blanket. We're bringing his core temperature down to 33 degrees Celsius. Immediately. A flurry of activity erupted as other nurses in the room, who had been watching in terrified silence, now rushed to comply. They recognized the voice of true leadership when they heard it. The president watched this all unfold, tears streaming freely down his cheeks. He took a hesitant step toward Ana, his hands trembling. He reached out, not to shake her hand, but as if to touch a holy relic. You saved him, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. My son, you saved my son. The digital clock on the monitor finally hit 0. A soft, electronic chime echoed through the room. It was supposed to have been the final note of a tragedy. Instead, it was a victory bell. The boy's heart was beating in a strong, steady sinus rhythm. A team of medical professionals was now working in perfect harmony, following the precise instructions of the nurse they had all tried to destroy. The impossible challenge had not only been met, it had been conquered. With the immediate crisis averted, a new, unspoken tension settled over the room, the tension of a world turned upside down. The established order had not just been challenged, it had been shattered, and its fragments were scattered at the feet of the quiet nurse who now stood at the center of this new universe. Ana's work was not done. With Leo's heart now beating on its own, she orchestrated the next critical phase of his care with the calm, undisputed authority of a battlefield general. His potassium levels will be dangerously low after that event, she said, not looking up from the monitors. I need a full metabolic panel, stat. And let's get a portable EEG in here. Dr. Petrova, she said, turning to the renowned specialist, her tone respectful but firm, I need you to monitor for any post-anoxic seizure activity. Dr. Petrova, a woman who commanded lecture halls of thousands, simply nodded in deference. Of course, she replied, immediately moving to prepare her equipment. In this room, at this moment, there was only one chief of medicine. The sight of Dr. Thorne scurrying to draw blood, his hands still trembling slightly as he prepped the vial, was a stark illustration of the power shift. He avoided Ana's gaze, his earlier arrogance replaced by a frantic, nervous energy. He was a man desperate to prove his competence to the very person whose competence he had so viciously mocked. His humiliation was not in a grand dressing down, but in every small, subservient action he was now forced to take. With the team working under Ana's flawless direction, President Caldwell finally turned his gaze away from his son. The softness of the grieving father receded, replaced by the hardened steel of a leader. He turned slowly, his eyes finding the two figures who had become ghosts in the room, Dr. Finch and Isabel Croft. Dr. Finch, the president's voice was dangerously quiet, devoid of the warmth he had shown Ana. A few minutes ago, you pronounced my son dead. You told me to accept it. You ridiculed and threatened this nurse for offering a shred of hope. You called her hope of cruel fantasy. I believe I deserve an explanation. Dr. Finch stood frozen, his face the color of ash. All the words, the complex medical jargon, the condescending phrases, had abandoned him. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, clicking sound came out. He looked at the monitors displaying the vibrant life signs of the boy he had given up on. He looked at Ana, the humble nurse now commanding the respect of a world-class specialist. He looked at the president, whose gaze was now filled with ice. There was nothing to say. His entire career, his lifetime of accolades, his godlike reputation, all had been rendered meaningless. He simply shook his head, a broken man. Isabel Croft, ever the strategist, saw the political disaster and tried one last, desperate gambit to regain control. She stepped forward, her voice regaining its smooth, managerial tone. Mr. President, this is an unprecedented event. A true miracle. My team and I will begin drafting a statement immediately. We can frame this as a testament to the incredible. You will do nothing, Isabel, the president cut her off, his voice like the crack of a whip. You will say nothing. You will not frame this. I was here. I saw what happened. I saw you try to have this woman, this hero, forcibly removed. I heard you threaten to destroy her career. Your counsel, which I have relied on for years, has been shown to be catastrophically flawed. You are to remain silent. Isabel recoiled as if struck. In that single, public rebuke, she had lost her most valuable asset, the president's trust. She was no longer the power behind the throne, she was just another piece of broken furniture in the room. As if to add a final, definitive seal to Anna's victory, Dr. Petrova let out another gasp. She was staring at the data log from the injection. Mr. President, she said, her voice filled with a new level of astonishment. I was wrong. What she did wasn't just a 1 in a billion shot. She pointed to a complex waveform on her screen. The data from the needle's pressure sensors shows the exact moment of injection. She didn't just hit the node. She timed the delivery of the cocktail to a window between the chaotic electrical spasms. A window that was less than 1/10 of a second long. It wasn't just surgery. It was a conversation. She listened to the chaos and timed her response perfectly. She looked at Ana in complete wonder. No human being should have that kind of sensory acuity. It's sublime. The room fell silent once more, absorbing the weight of this final revelation. Ana had not just been skilled or lucky. She had operated on a level of medical genius that no one in that room had ever conceived of. Her work finally done, Ana stepped back from the bed. The adrenaline began to fade, and the quiet, humble nurse began to return. She ignored the stares, the whispers, the broken pride of her former tormentors. She simply watched the steady rise and fall of Leo's chest. The president approached her again, his eyes shining with unshed tears. How can I ever repay you? Ana looked up at the most powerful man in the world, and gave him a small, tired smile. You don't have to, sir, she said softly. I was just doing my job. Her job was to care for the patient, and she had done it, not for glory, or fame, or to prove anyone wrong, but because it was the right thing to do. And that pure, simple truth was the most resounding victory of all. The sterile, high-stakes tension of the presidential medical wing had evaporated, replaced by a hushed, sacred reverence. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was no longer a symbol of a crisis, but a steady, calming hymn of victory. The nurses and junior doctors who had previously been invisible cogs in Dr. Finch's machine now moved with a renewed purpose, their eyes constantly flicking towards Ana, seeking silent approval for their actions. They were no longer just following a protocol, they were part of a miracle, and Ana was its quiet architect. Ana, for her part, seemed oblivious to the seismic shift in the room's power structure. Her focus remained steadfastly on her patient. She adjusted Leo's blanket, gently brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and checked the 4 drips with a practiced eye. Her movements were the same humble, efficient gestures she had performed 1,000 times with 1,000 other patients. There was no trace of triumph in her demeanor, no hint of "I told you so." Her victory wasn't in the stunned silence of her detractors, but in the warm, living breath of the boy in the bed. Having ensured every detail of his immediate care was being handled, she moved to a small computer terminal in the corner and began methodically typing up her nursing notes, her face illuminated by the quiet glow of the screen. The most extraordinary event in modern medical history was being documented with the same mundane diligence as a routine temperature check. President Caldwell watched her for a long moment, his heart swelling with a gratitude so profound it felt like a physical weight in his chest. As Ana prepared to gather her things, her shift nearing its end, he moved to intercept her. "Nurse Oliveira," he said, his voice low and thick with emotion. Ana looked up, a little startled to be addressed so directly again. "Ana," he corrected himself. "What you did today, it wasn't just a job. It was a gift. Not just to my son, or to me, but to the world. I don't yet know what the future holds, but I know that a person with your talent, your character, should not be hidden away. We will speak again soon. But I want you to know, whatever you want, whatever you need, you will have it." It was a promise of unimaginable magnitude, delivered by the most powerful man on earth. A blank check for a new life. Ana simply offered a small, tired, and genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. President. Just seeing him stable is all the reward I need." Her humility seemed to sharpen the president's focus, reminding him of the arrogance that had almost cost him everything. His expression hardened as he turned his attention to the wreckage of the old regime. His gaze fell upon Isabel Croft, who was attempting to blend into the background, furiously typing on her phone, likely trying to spin the unspinnable. "Isabel," he called out, his voice cutting through the room's quiet efficiency. She looked up, startled. "Empty your pockets. Place your security badge, your phone, and any other government property on that table." He pointed to a sterile steel tray. "Your resignation will be on my desk within the hour. It is effective immediately." Isabel's face, a carefully constructed mask of cool control, finally shattered. Mr. President, please, You advised me to let my son die," the president stated, each word a spike of ice. "You valued protocol over a life. You saw a hero and tried to have her thrown out like trash. Your judgment is a liability this administration, and I, as a father, can no longer afford. You are dismissed." There was no appeal. No negotiation. With a single command, her world of access and influence was annihilated. She stood there for a moment, utterly exposed, before numbly walking to the tray and surrendering the symbols of her power. Then, she turned and walked out of the room, a political phantom. Next, the consequences found Dr. Thorne. He had been working diligently, a man transformed by the awe and terror of the last hour. As Ana finished her notes and prepared to leave, he approached her, his head bowed, his hands twisting nervously. "Oliveira." "Ana," he stammered, unable to meet her eyes. What I said, how I acted, there's no excuse. It was arrogant and unprofessional. I've never seen anything like what you did. It was genius. I am truly sorry." Ana looked at the humbled young doctor, seeing not the bully he had been, but the shaken professional he was now. There was no anger in her eyes, only a quiet understanding. "We all have things to learn, doctor," she said softly. "Just take good care of him. That's all that matters." She gave him a slight nod of acknowledgement and walked away, leaving him standing there, not punished, but fundamentally changed. His karmic justice was a lifetime of remembering this day every time he was tempted by arrogance. Only one figure remained. Dr. Alastair Finch. He hadn't moved. He was still standing like a statue, watching the legacy he had built over a lifetime crumble into dust. The president turned to the head of his security detail, who had been standing silently by the door. "Agent Foster," the president commanded. Secure this room. Download every byte of data from every monitor, every log, every camera feed. Dr. Finch will not be leaving. He and I have a great deal more to discuss about what constitutes medical advice. Once the medical team had fully taken over Leo's care, a heavy, judicial silence descended upon the room. The president dismissed the last of the staff, leaving only himself, Agent Foster, and the hollowed-out figure of Dr. Alastair Finch. The celebrated surgeon looked small and old, his expensive suit seeming to hang off him like a costume. The aura of invincibility that had once surrounded him had completely vanished. The data logs have been secured, Dr. Finch, the president began, his voice calm and deliberate, carrying the weight of a judge about to pass sentence. They tell a fascinating story. They show that at 1432, you declared my son deceased. They also show that at that exact moment, the post-mortem electrical noise you so condescendingly dismissed was, in fact, the very chaotic arrhythmia that Nurse Oliveira identified. He took a step closer, his eyes cold. It's all there in the numbers. Your failure wasn't just a simple misdiagnosis. It was a failure of ego. You were so blinded by your own reputation that you couldn't see the truth right in front of you. You looked at the data, and you interpreted it to fit your own narrative of an impossible case, because the alternative, that you, the great Alastair Finch, might be missing something, was unthinkable. Finch remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. There was nothing left to say. The data was absolute. But your greatest failure wasn't medical, the president continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It was your cruelty. You didn't just try to silence a subordinate, you tried to extinguish a spark of hope in a grieving father's heart for no other reason than to protect your own pride. You wielded your authority like a weapon to humiliate a good woman who was only trying to do her job. The president turned to his agent. Agent Foster will escort you to a conference room where you will wait. My legal team will be taking your formal statement. The National Medical Board will be opening a full investigation into your conduct, and I will be providing them with all of this data, as well as my personal testimony. Your licenses, your board positions, your entire career, all will be reviewed in the harshest possible light. He delivered the final, crushing blow. You spent your life building a legacy, Doctor. But a legacy isn't what you build, it's what you leave behind. You will not be remembered as a pioneer. You will be remembered as a cautionary tale. The brilliant surgeon who became a monument to the dangers of arrogance. That is your legacy now. Finch visibly crumpled, the last of his composure breaking. He gave a weak, shuddering nod and allowed the agent to lead him from the room, not as a titan of medicine, but as a prisoner of his own hubris. Hours later, the world was on fire with the story. News channels across the globe ran the headline, "The Miracle Nurse, Unsung Hero Saves President's Son When Top Doctor Gives Up." Ana Oliveira's hospital ID photo was plastered across every screen. She was an instant global icon. Talk shows vied for her first interview. Medical schools were already offering to name scholarships after her. The world was desperate to celebrate her, to elevate her, to own a piece of her story. But Ana was nowhere to be found. She was in her small, meticulously clean one-bedroom apartment miles away from the chaos. The space was a reflection of her, practical, warm, and utterly unpretentious. A collection of well-tended succulents sat on her windowsill, and stacks of books filled every available corner. The frantic energy of the media storm felt like it belonged to another planet. Her phone, lying on the kitchen counter, was buzzing itself into a frenzy. The screen lit up with an endless stream of calls and texts from unknown numbers, news outlets, and even the president's personal secretary. She looked at the vibrating device, a portal to a world of fame and fortune she had never asked for. With a small, weary sigh, she reached over and switched it to silent. Just then, it lit up with a different call, a familiar name and picture that made her smile. She picked it up immediately. "Hi, Vovo," she said, her voice instantly softer, shedding the stresses of the day. The faint, crackling voice of her grandmother, the woman who had first taught her to listen to the body's hidden languages, filled the quiet apartment. The conversation was simple. They talked about the weather back home, about a neighbor's new puppy, about the herbs in her grandmother's garden. I heard something on the news, her grandmother said gently. About you. It was a long day, Ana replied, her answer characteristically understated. But the patient is doing well now. That is good, her grandmother said, a world of pride and understanding in those 3 words. That is what matters. Come for dinner on Sunday. I'll make your favorite stew. I'll be there, Ana promised. After she hung up, Ana walked to her window and looked out at the sprawling city lights. The world outside could shout her name, build her up into a legend, or forget her by the next news cycle. It didn't matter. The validation she needed was not in their headlines, but in the steady heartbeat of a boy who was alive, and in the quiet love of a grandmother who already knew her worth. She had done her job. She had saved a life. And tomorrow, she would wake up and be ready to do it all over again. Her victory was not in becoming a hero, but in knowing she had always been a nurse. Ana's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't found in fame or fancy titles, but in quiet competence and unwavering character. The world is full of arrogant voices, but it's the quiet heroes, the ones who act not for applause, but because it is the right thing to do, who truly save the day. We believe everyone has a story about an unsung hero. Maybe it was a teacher, a colleague, a friend, or even a moment in your own life where you were underestimated. Who is the Ana you've known? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space that celebrates the quiet heroes all around us. For more inspiring stories where the underdog gets their moment to shine and prove their true worth, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Thank you for watching, and never underestimate the power of a quiet voice.